everybody. Welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 287 of the show. Got 3 new reviews for you fine folks this week. That's going to include Delver's LLC, Hostile Takeover, Domestication, a fantasy LitRPG adventure, also called the Battle Mage Farmer, and also the last book currently in the Sun series called Consolidation. There we go. Got 3 reviews for you folks. Before we're going to get any of those, though, we're going to go into some LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we don't really have any. Not a lot has happened. We have DragonCon coming up in a couple months. We'll be there for the podcast to talk to some LitRPG authors and maybe get some interviews or just hang out with some fine folks and see some LitRPG related talks and things. Always nice to see the crowd there, though. But for now, we're going to move into stuff that has come out since the last episode of the podcast, and that's going to include Unchained Potential, Whispering Crystals, book number 4, a new series called Chrysalis, a LitRPG Evolution series. It's actually another series called Chrysalis, but this is a different one. So there we go. It's a monster evolution story. Also out is the Nexus book number 3. The Necrotic Apocalypse book number 4 is out as well, as is a new book from DB King called Fatehaven Farm. Also out is another new series called A Root and Steel, a monster hunting LitRPG. Also out is Assassin's Wrath, as is the 3rd book in an Outcast in Another World series, which is a fantasy LitRPG adventure. The 2nd book in the Primal Hunter series is out. The 10th series, 10 books in the Titan series is out for Novaterra. A new series from Joshua Kern called Portals of Change is out. It's the 2nd book in the series of the Nameless Chronicles. The 15th book in the Dragonheart series called Dragon City is out. The 3rd book in the Dragon Core Chronicles series is out by Lars McMuller. The 2nd book in the Badges of Dorcam series is out. The new series from Han Yang is out, Mayor of Mythos, and a secular LitRPG fantasy. The 3rd book in the Master Hunter K series is out for you to enjoy. The 2nd book in the Crafter's Fate series is out. Book number 3 in Guardians of Astrafall is out as well. A new book from J.D. Astra called Monster Haven book number 1, Reluctant Dungeon. So we got a new Dungeon Core story there for you. A new series from Wolf and Caliban called Dungeon Market, The Ballad of the Shady Greg, book number 2, with book number 3, I think, coming out a little bit later this month or next month as well. Also out is Sorcerer Eternal, Singularity Online, book number 7. Also out is Unbound, book number 2, called Silence. The 2nd book in the Tokens and Towers series is out for you to enjoy by Harmon Cooper. The long-awaited 2nd book in the Portal to Nova Roma series called Venice. This is a transported to a fantasy RPG world story. I enjoy the heck out of book number 1. I'm looking forward to reading book number 2. Also out is the 6th book in the Sky Realms Online series. So all kinds of new ebooks for you to enjoy. But we also have some new audiobooks for you. That includes the Unbound book number 2, Silence. Also out is the complete trilogy for the Nova Online series. So it's actually really long, but I think it's in excess of 35 hours. So a nice, value for your 1 Audible credit there. The 4th volume of Solo Leveling is out for you to enjoy as well. Also Biomancer book number 2 by Shimur Kuznets. The Hedge Wizard is out, a self-titled a LitRPG progression fantasy adventure. So there we go. I also have the Titan series, Novaterra book number 9, out as an audiobook. The 2nd book in the System Return, Natural Laws Apocalypse series, book number 2. Also out is the Apocalypse Core series, which is a new book. Also out is Z Knockdown OVR World Online, book number 2. The Sigma World book number 6 is out as well, as is the Alpha Physics book number 4, and the Bandit of Dorcam book number 2, and Dragon Core Chronicles book number 3. So actually all 3 of those are out as ebooks and audiobooks. Also the Primal Hunter book number 2 series is out as an audiobook, as is the Frost Ridge, the Way book, and Climbing the Dragon's Tower, Dragon Riders of Lon by Han Yang. The Necrotic Apocalypse is out as an ebook and as an audiobook, as is Chrysalis, and a new 3rd book in the Foodstuff series from Arthur Stone, Eating Right, is out as an audiobook. And the Apocalypse System of the Apocalypse series, book number 4. Apocalypse Quest System is out, so the 4th book in that series is out as an audiobook. As is the 3rd book in the Jeff the Game Master series, and Apocalypse Game, the Chess Warboard. Also, the RPG Apocalypse book number 2 is out as an audiobook, and The Forgotten Horror by John Stovall, book number 4, the Dungeon of Story series. And last but not least, Goblin Summoner, book number 4, out as an audiobook. So all kinds of great stuff for you to enjoy as ebook and audiobooks. On to stuff that's coming out in the near future. We're going to start off with the June 26th, which is going to be the 3rd book in the Ballad of the Shady Greg series. On June 27th, the Nexus Games, book number 2. On July 24th, June 27th probably, it's going to be Independence Corps, a Holiday Dungeon Core novella. On June 27th, it'll be He Who Fights At Monsters, book number 6. On June 30th, it'll be Apocalypse Nights, book number 3. On June 30th, it'll be Sentenced to Troll, book number 5. June 30th, it'll be Chaos, book number 2, Legacy of Hades. On July 1st, it'll be The Grand Game, Empyrean Rise. So there's actually another, I think it's set in the Roham and Minder series, the Grand Games novel, so it's a Grand Game story. So if you like that series, new side series apparently. The July the 1st will also bring you The Bad Guys, book number 9. On July the 1st, it'll be Immortal Shell Creations Main, book number 2. July the 1st, it'll also bring you the 8th book in the Eternal Dominion series. On July the 5th, World of Magic, book number 4. July the 5th, it'll be Apocalypse Online, book number 4. July the 5th as well, it'll be Arise, Dark Crusader. That's the 2nd book. Yeah, 2nd book in that series. On July the 6th, it'll be Tower of Somnus, book number 1, Foundations, by K.L. Palman. You might not like him from his other series he's written. On July the 8th, it'll be the Masters of the Minos series, a city-building LitRPG, King of Minos, book number 2. On July the 12th, the 2nd book in the Monster Haven series by J.D. Astra. On July the 12th, it'll be The Great Core Paradox, a new series. July the 13th, we'll bring you Vaudevillian, book number 2, called Black Tie Villainy. On July the 15th, it'll be Oath of the Mad Dog, a Liberty Fantasy Adventure. July the 15th, it'll be Sowing Seasons, book number 2 for casual farming. On July 15th, it'll be The Change, The Rise of the Winter Wolf, book number 2. July 15th, it'll be The Vine Apostasy, book number 6, The Sixth Ruin. On July the 18th, it'll be Overlord of the Dungeon in the System, book number 4. July the 19th, it'll be The First Stain, Sagas of the Seer, book number 2. On July 19th, it'll be Immortal Kings, The World Over, book number 2. On July 19th, it'll be The Legend of Randomly Ghost Town, book number 3. July the 15th, it'll be Reality Benders, book number 9. July the 26th, Apocalypse Unleashed. July 26th, Cultivator vs. the System, book number 2. July 28th, Realms of Power and Fury, book number 2. July the 29th, Harbinger of Destruction. July 31st, The Third Apocalypse, Volume 2 of a Generic Reincarnation Apocalypse Regressor, book number 2. So there we go. All kinds of numbers in the same book. It's a Regressor series, actually really liked book number 1 in the series. We got a good review a couple weeks ago. Okay, on to new reviews and releases. Okay, first review of the episode is going to be Delvers LLC Hostile Takeover, the latest book in the Delvers LLC universe, written by Blaze Corbin. It is 353 pages, $5.98. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the novel description. The Delvers LLC group is moving into the unknown. Tasked with the dangerous quest by Dolos, the god of Ludus, they have had to leave one of their members behind. Their journey will be full of shocking revelations as they learn more of Earth's ancient history. Forces of evil that have long been gathering on Ludus have begun to act. Henry and Jason are rapidly being caught in the middle of a world war. The stakes have never been higher. Although great, the power they have acquired thus far might not be enough to survive. Will Delvers LLC be able to complete their next mission? More importantly, even if they do so, is the fight for the planet one they can even win? So there we go. This is a nice entry in the series. It continues the adventures of the Delvers LLC group. It's anything really that different than like the slice of life adventures you've seen in the past. There are some really nice moments, and of course the storyline is unfolding a little bit more as explanations come from why Dolos has collected all these people in the first place and done these experiments and given them powers. There's still also the same fun banter bantering dialogue and slice of life interludes between good action scenes that the series is kind of known for. And there are some really good fights. I gotta say, like especially the one in the middle of the story, about 50 or 60%. I'm like, oh, that's probably the best fight of the entire book. But after that fight, I was like, oh, this is if this is the middle, the rest of the fights in this book have to be like even better. And they were still okay. Like there's still some action here and there, but I felt like that was the peak. And a lot of what happened after that point, after about 60%, is a lot of it was just set up for potential other things. Like there's also character development and less impactful actions. But if like a lot of it's just like, oh, cleaning up some quest lines and just setting up what's supposed to happen next. I was really expecting that I guess bigger events were going to happen potentially, since it was being built up. This almost feels like this story is potentially like almost half of a book, but like there was probably more to come that is just hasn't been written yet. And if that's the case, I guess that's a nice hook to get into the next book. I know I want to read it. But it was still entertaining. I think it just peaked a little bit early for me. Still entertaining stuff all around. If you like the Delvers LLC universe and Blaze Corvin, I think you're going to still enjoy this book. I did. I'm giving it a 7.6 out of 10. That's still a little bit of above like middle good for me. Still not quite great, but like still very entertaining story. That's going to be Delvers LLC Hostile Takeover with a score of 7.6 out of 10. And next up is going to be Domestication, a fantasy LitRPG adventure, also called the Battle Mage Farmer series, book number 1, written by Seth Ring. It is 412 pages. It is $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. A world on the precipice of the apocalypse. A secret forged in the flames of war. A chance to start over. For John Sutton, only one of those 3 things matters. Retired from a decade of brutal war, he wants nothing more than a quiet pastoral life while he does his best to stem the steady increase of his doom points before they hit 100, signaling the start of the end. He's been given a small farm on the outskirts of the Empire as a thanks for his service, but no matter how far he travels, it's impossible to escape the war's devastating effects on the world. Bandits, suspicious townfolks, a mysterious pair of siblings, and a secret that lurks in the mountains all threaten John's peace. It will take all his considerable power to keep from burning everything to the ground. And there we go. That's actually a fairly decent novel description for the story. This is a overpowered main character story who has a fighter mage class who becomes a farmer when he retires. That's essentially the gist of the premise of the story. There are some details about the main character that, he was taken from, he was one of those isekai stories, essentially, isekai stories, where the main character is taken from our world. Him and a bunch of groups land here to, for whatever reason. And this is kind of taking that step and, what if he actually survived long enough to get to retirement? And he wants to be a farmer. And that is sort of the core of what the story is. And that background is actually revealed a little bit throughout the entire story. But for the most part, it's a slice of life story of a kind of him getting his farm, dealing with local thugs to try to rip him off. And eventually there's kind of a revelation about some interesting world building and plot lines that I think do a really good job of setting up some larger series goals and world building and context for why magic has been forbidden in this world, which is, nice enough details. But it's mostly about the main character getting his equipment, starting to farm, figuring out how to make his farm profitable, with some fairly rarely interspersed conflicts, whether it's going to be fighting monsters or dealing with bandits or dealing with other plot devices that are in the story, other adventure-y things. But it's, that's what it is. It's an entertaining story. I have a good time with it. I will talk about a few things that I thought notes that didn't quite hit quite correctly for me. But before we get into that, we'll start into the RPG stuff, because it is a new series, of course. On the RPG side of things, it's really set up as a fantasy world with a RPG system in it. where certain people have classes that make them much more powerful than the average person. There's not a lot of progression for the main character. Again, as I've stated in kind of the setup here of description, the main character is at the end of his power curve arc. He's already a very overpowered character. He's lived in this world for the majority of his life, and he's already he's hit his cap as far as what he can do with his class to a degree. And so there's not a lot of RPG progression from him on that end. He's already a high leveled character with the very limited class skills, already maxed out, a load of free points that he can't use. And part of that is being unlocked in the story. There's again a little bit of a progression, but there's not really till the end. So he's already built up all of his non-class related skills as far as they can go. And he's a badass fighter, and he's supposed to have this mage class. But again, there's not much progression. The only numbers that really change on a regular basis for most of the story is like the doom points, which is used as just kind of this, story hook, where anytime he's using magic or anytime he's doing an action that either brings the world closer to the apocalypse or farther away from it, those number of doom points change. And apparently if it hits 100, that's supposed to be the signal, the start of the apocalypse. And his big quest, like the literal, notification quest, is to prevent the apocalypse by keeping those doom points down. So that's something that's revealed, why and how as the story progresses. Overall, again, pretty good story. I had a good time with it. The conflicts with like the gang and the Wolf King came to a satisfying ending. There's a gradual revelation about the history of magic in the world and how it relates to the main character's farming. And I thought it was strung out enough throughout the page of the story that never felt like an info dump. And I really enjoyed the gradual release of that information as he's doing, including his background. Additionally, the farming, while it was the least interesting aspect to me, because it never really went into detail about like actual farming practices. It was kind of a magic version of farming where he could grow things in a very short amount of time, had magical beasts to help him farm, and there were certain system powers in place to help him grow things. It just was. It's perfectly fine. Slice of life aspect of the story just was the most entertaining part for me. The only thing that kind of brought the score down from being really good for me was that the main character is so overpowered that there never really felt like there was any real tension in the story. It always never felt like the main character was ever going to lose, because at will he could sort of just flex his magical and military might and literally kill everybody if he really wanted to. And so like once that is established, like, okay, there were other ways of building a tension in the story, I think. But there's never really any chance of like him losing. So that was a slight drawback when the stakes don't really feel like they were there for the main character's life. And then anyways, but other than that, small point, is still an entertaining story. I had a good time with it. Gives it a score of 7.5 out of 10. That's a really solid middle of the road good for me. Not really great. Just like, really, it's a good story. Definitely recommend it to anybody who's interested in an overpowered main character story, who thinks that the farming aspect might be interesting as well. So it has really good quality. Again, the action is pretty regular. It's just, there's not a lot of tension in an overpowered main character. So unless you give it some other kind of conflict that he has to take risks and chance against, that alternate than just straight fighting, and that's occurs to some degree, but not a lot. So had a good time with it. 7.5 out of 10 for Domestication, a fantasy LitRPG adventure, Battle Mage Farmer, book number 1. Okay, next review is going to be Shadow Sun Consolidation, written by Dave Wilmarth. This is the 6th book in the series. It is 547 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Alistair has struggled almost non-stop since the apocalypse, battling monsters, aliens, and other humans when necessary. He has risen from a scared gamer geek with nothing, no home or family, not even a decent weapon, to become Emperor of Earth and several other worlds. Now, as he attempts to consolidate and stabilize his holdings, he faces the consequences of the very actions that helped him rise to power. Invictus has grown. Millions of new citizens now look for him for support and protection. While he tries to gather together human survivors across Earth, new enemies arise and threaten his empire. His worst fears confront him, and Alistair is not prepared. There we go. It's a pretty, I guess, good description of the first couple of chapters. That's the setup. This is This is an entertaining story. I had a really good time with it. It is really good. I've had a really fun time with this entire series. It ends up being the last book in the series, but it really doesn't feel like it. Like it feels like there's a lot of things the main character can still do in this universe. Um, but it, like in retrospect, as you're reading to the end of it, and the author's like, "Oh, this is the end of the jury for now. I might come back to it at some point, maybe, but for now, this is it." Um, Looking back, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess." Like he really is trying to like tie up some loose ends, and um, he even went back to like to clear up some quest lines. Where like, "Oh yeah, that I totally forgot about that monster that story though that I just had kind of been forgotten about from like the first couple books," and he ties them off. As I was reading, I was like, man, this is an old boss monster. Where has this guy been? But it makes sense, I guess, in retrospect. This is a fine series. It keeps up the action and tension, adding new kinds of two amounts of scale for the conflicts and fighting as the main character is expanding past Earth and those kind of conflicts where they're all on the ground. There's some nice space battles that I really enjoyed as a change of type of conflict. I'm not really into space fights, I guess, a lot of reading. It's hard to judge like how good this was, but it was entertaining for me. Like I could picture the elements of like the space battles and the turning of the traps set by one force against another. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, I don't know if it's gonna scratch the itch for somebody who's really into that kind of like storytelling. But for me, I was like, oh, this is a nice little change of pace from like regular like stabby kind of fantasy fights, which are exist in a lot of the story for a lot of it. There's also just like again, so the slice life element of it, where the main character is with his group and they're going around different places, and he has a lot more spaces to check on and to develop and to do these little like mini adventure arcs. And it's, the same kind of story where like, oh, space battles are interchangeable. Main characters that you may or may not like are going to die and not die. But, no character is potentially safe, obviously, except for like, maybe a core group or something. But even then, there are characters that, like, if you like them, they may not exist. And that's kind of been a thing with the series entirely. Like, oh, characters can die. You're like, I think sometimes the author's just like, who's gonna die this book? And he'll roll a d20 and that's the person that's gonna die, unfortunately. There you go. Like there's still like kingdom building elements in the story. It's not as it does feel a little more like civilization, like Galaxy or something, where like he has these outposts and he has to conquer them and bring them into the fold and their benefits and detriments or whatever, and deal with being stabbed in the back by other alien societies or groups and factions. So I like the different change of pace in that expansion as well. But again, it was just like, oh, by the end it was like, oh, I feel like there's a ton more story to like tell, especially as you're expanding into the larger universe, to kind of like be ended at 2 or 3 colony worlds when there's like a lot more other factions and a whole universe to kind of explore. It's like, oh, okay, that's maybe the authors just like want to take a break, or this is like a great place to like potentially end the series if it's not like selling as well as you're hoping it would at this point at what book 6 in the series. Either way, still had a good time with it. The RPG progression is a little slower because the main character is still high level, but there is still progression. The other characters still level up, but again, it's a little slower than it is in book 1 or book 2. Still had a good time. The adventure is ending, unfortunately, at this point. Maybe it'll pick up in the future if the author feels like, he has more adventures to tell for the characters. But for now, this is kind of it's not a bad ending in any way, shape, or form. The author does a good job of tying up some old storylines and bringing a sort of like, oh, this is a pretty decently and a happy-ish ending for the main character. Like he's not in a bad place. He has his family, he has his friends. He's conquered all those like big Earth plot lines, and in the future, if the author wants to continue on, he still has the larger universe to kind of explore if he really wants to get in. Yeah. For me, though, had a good time with it. Gets a score of 7.7 out of 10. That's a really good score for me. So well above like middle of the road good. It's perching great. That's Shadow Sun Consolidation for a score of 7.7 out of 10. Okay, folks, that's it for the show. A quick 3 reviews and some other information for you. Remember, thank you very much for listening, for watching. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our website at littlepodcast.com, of course, or you can follow us on Spotify and Audible to get this episode of the podcast downloaded to your phone or listen to it wherever you want to. Of course, we of course have links in our show notes for other groups in the podcast where you can talk to your favorite LitRPG authors and readers and talk about the genre that you love, or just see new reviews or get recommendations. All the good stuff there. And before I forget, just an update on the YouTube situation. If you weren't aware, we had gotten our YouTube channel closed down probably a good month or so ago, and recently we just got a return to us. I guess the issue with the copyright strikes that we got from this foreign Korean company, I finally got them resolved in our favor, and so the channel got reinstated. I was already working through re-uploading like the 500 plus episodes of all the podcasts that we have, including show notes, and just re-establishing links. But thankfully the original channel under the Geek Bites podcast title is back up, and so I don't have to go through all that massive work, which would have been months in working through all that stuff. So thankfully everything's been restored, all those things have been restored, and it's a huge hassle that is not have to go there. So if you sign up for the new LitRPG podcast channel that I had set up, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to go click on it again. And but we got the original channel, and that already has everything set up, the 500 plus episodes of the show, of the various podcasts that I've done. So I'm going to go back over there just because it's less of a hassle to try to reset everything up. I'm not going to take down the other one just because, it's not necessarily. I like to have a backup just in case something like this happens again. Hopefully it doesn't, of course. But thank you guys for taking the time to look at the new channel. But this one is still there. It's thankful. And if you like YouTube, just make sure you subscribe to us there. And you can always watch these wonderful videos a couple days after, they're sent off to our wonderful Patreon subscribers who, toss a couple coins here and there and dollars to help keep the podcast free and ad free, which I always appreciate, of course, guys. Thanks. And until we can hang out again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.